English Pronunciation Lesson 10. Topic: Intonation. Part 3. Rising intonation. What is it? What does it communicate? Rising intonation is a pattern in which your voice rises to a high pitch by the end of a thought group or statement. It communicates uncertainty. You are not sure of the truth, and/or you are asking the listener to answer yes or no to a question. It can also communicate lack of finality. With rising intonation, you may be telling your listener that you're not done speaking. You might be thinking of something else to add. So it's very important to understand and master rising and falling intonation. With too much rising intonation in your speech, you can come across as unsure, and your listener might not know when you're done speaking. Now let me give you an example of rising intonation.
Eric plays the flute, clarinet, and saxophone. Isn't that great? In this example, we have a sentence and a question. That means we have at least two thought groups. Let's mark those. Here and down here. Now let's work backwards. Isn't that great? The final content word is great. That means this is the point where our voice will go up. Great has one syllable, so we only have one syllable to make our voice glide up. Great. And we're using rising intonation because this question requires a yes or no answer. By asking, "Isn't that great?" we expect our listener to agree with us and say yes. Now let's look at the sentence. It's broken up by two commas, one after flute and two after clarinet. We're actually dealing then with three thought groups. If you remember from previous lessons on thought groups, commas tell us to pause. So if we have three thought groups, then we also can talk about three final content words that receive stress. They are flute, clarinet, and saxophone. Now this sentence is a list. We're listing information. Eric plays three instruments. 1, 2, 3. When we have a list, we use rising intonation in each phrase until we get to the final item of the list. So we're actually going to go up on flute, then we'll go up again on clarinet. This is our final item in the list, so we're going to go down. Okay. Listen to how I read that sentence. Eric plays the flute, clarinet, and saxophone. Again, when we are listing items, one possible pattern is to use rising intonation in each phrase until we get to the last one. In this case, it's saxophone. Again, the number of syllables makes a difference in how we rise or fall. Flute has one syllable, so we only have one syllable to make our voice glide up. Clarinet has three syllables, clarinet, but it's the final syllable that is stressed, and there's a pause right after, which means there's nothing following. We have to use one syllable to make our voice glide up. Clarinet. In the case of saxophone, there are also three syllables, but the stressed syllable is the first one, which means we have two more syllables to make our voice fall down, and actually can fall down even further. The more unstressed syllables that follow, the more our voice can step down. Saxophone. Listen to the entire example again. Eric plays the flute, clarinet, and saxophone. Isn't that great?
Exercise 3. Watch the video clip. Try to identify statements with rising intonation.
Can you play the flute?
Sure.
That was nice. What was that?
That was a song by a band called Sublime. It was a reggae song.
Do you play any other instruments?
Yes, I also play clarinet. This is my clarinet. It's made out of wood. And I also play saxophone.
How did you learn to play all these instruments?
I started on saxophone when I was a little boy, and I liked it so much that I went to school for music, and I got my degree in music education, where I learned to play many different instruments so that I could teach them to children.
Exercise 4. Repeat the statements that Jennifer and Eric said. Use rising intonation. Set 1. Listen and repeat. Number 1. Can you play the flute? 2. Do you play any other instruments? With primary stress in the middle of these questions, remember that your voice must continue to rise until the very end. Also, to sound more natural, here's a tip. Imagine your voice like a ball bouncing across a room. It first hits the ground and then bounces up into the air. So down a little bit on play and then start rising up, up, up until the end of the question. Can you play the flute? Same thing with number 2. Bouncing down a little bit and then rising. Do you play any other instruments? Set 2. These two examples show how in everyday speech people sometimes use rising intonation because they're forming their thoughts as they speak. The rising intonation tells you, the listener, that they're probably going to add information to what they've already said. Listen closely and I'll try to read number 1 as Eric said it. This is my clarinet. It's made out of wood. Now you try. Now let me read number 2. I started on saxophone when I was a little boy. Now you try. And note that my voice went down on boy, but not to its lowest pitch, because the statement is not complete. Eric went on to say something more. It was the first half of a statement. Again, I started on saxophone when I was a little boy. End of part 3. Please go on to the next part of this lesson.